In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in Black and White emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White, where we are coloring conversations on the canvas of America. Tonight, our special guest is Dr. Gabriel Warren. Dr. Gabriel Warren is a husband, father, brother, son, and leader to many. He currently serves as the interim provost and VP of Academic and Student Affairs at the second largest two-year community and technical college in Minnesota. In this role, Warren is responsible for overseeing a team that delivers 162 degree programs, diplomas, and certificates each year. In addition to his role as a higher ed administrator, Warren is the author of two books, Push for the Journey and No Regrets, Living Your Life to the Fullest. Dr. Warren is an advocate for change, and one of the ways he does this is through the Changing the Narrative podcast, which he is the founder and co-host. Dr. Warren is also a motivational speaker who speaks to audiences about topics such as overcoming adversity, leadership, and learning how and when to pivot. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to the show Dr. Gabriel Warren. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on the show. It's exciting. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, sir. Is there anything you'd like to add to your bio before we get into the show?
No, I think you covered it quite well. That was great. Thank you.
Well, I definitely appreciate it. And, you know, what I like to start out with is, I know with these crazy times that we have going on now, especially when we talk about education, and there's so many things going on as to what's transpiring with the Department of Education. I like to start out with with your leadership in higher education. Can you tell us what initially drew you to a career in higher education leadership?
You know, I went a non-traditional path. Meaning that after I finished my undergraduate program, I went into corporate America for 12 years. And along that journey, I just kind of started to see how there was an opportunity really to really impact the next generation, because I got into leadership in corporate America, and I started seeing that there were lots of skills gaps that I was noticing from new hires coming in. So people didn't have soft skills on learning how to speak to others when they came in, or how to, get in there and network or do the different things that I felt like you needed to do to be effective in the workplace. And that was kind of like the initial spark for me to want to go back to school and learn, one, what it meant to be a good teacher, but then two, how to train other people. And then when I actually started teaching at the college level, myself and one of my colleagues, we did a research study with some college students on like developing soft skills. And that was the thing that really kind of got me into, wanting to really help train more and more people to be leaders. So that was kind of the initial spark. And then I'm sure as we go through this interview, we'll get into more of kind of like my leadership philosophy and all those kind of things.
But, so in just thinking about that culture that was in corporate America compared to you coming back to teaching students here at a major college, can you tell us what's the difference in that culture, and how are you actually helping to create a better culture going forward for these younger people?
Yeah, I mean the big difference that I see. So when I was in corporate America, there were people that may have been new right out of their college experience, and they may have not have had a job that was like a professional job. Maybe they worked for say a restaurant or maybe a retail store, and they were working on that job, getting in as they were working on their degree. And a lot of times those jobs, people don't always look at those as a career type of position. So they weren't necessarily putting in the same level of effort to learn some of the soft skills, learning how to get up and give a presentation, learning how to deliver great customer service and things like that. Whereas in higher ed, you have a group of people who are coming in and they are going to school specifically to learn certain tasks. So they may feel like, hey, I want to be a manager, or I want to be a business owner, or I want to be whatever. And they're trying to really develop and hone those skills as they're in school so that when they get out, they are able to be more effective because they're thinking about what is their next step to get them to that career. So I think that was the big difference in the two roles. And one of the things that I've been trying to do, so I started, of course, in the classroom teaching, and I spend a lot of time not just teaching the subject matter. My discipline is marketing, so I taught a lot of marketing and sales and advertising and those types of classes. But additionally, we spent a lot of time on like developing presentations, getting up, doing public speaking. How do you network with not just your classmates, but how do you network also with your faculty members and other members on campus and in the community? And I think those things also just built upon when I got into leadership in higher ed, when I became a dean and now a provost. What I've been able to do now is take all of those skills and say, okay, now how do I help train leaders who are other deans or other faculty members on campus and help them to also continue to do that same type of thing in the classroom? Because our students are, they're learning how to do a certain subject, but they're also learning how to get out into this world that's ever changing and being effective in it.
So can you describe a pivotal moment that affirmed your calling in this field?
Yeah, when I was in corporate America, I was in the middle of like thinking about a career shift. And one of the things that was pivotal for me was I was actually I went to a leadership training. I think this was back around 2012. And in that training, it talked about the need for more Blacks and African Americans and really persons of color to be in the higher ed space, specifically in the business discipline. Because again, my area is business. And this training just talked about how there are so many people in that discipline, but there are not a lot of professors at that point in time. And then leading up to administrators. So that was the thing that let me know that one, we needed more people that looked like me in that space. And two, I started realizing that the students that were coming through a lot of these colleges who looked like you and I, they may not have had role models or visible people that they could see in the classroom to be able to aspire to even careers like this. When I grew up, I didn't even know that I had the potential to be a professor, let alone a dean or now a provost, because I never saw that. And I think being made aware of that was the thing that really kind of shifted my mindset to say, hey, I want to aspire to be that so that hopefully I can unlock the door and opportunities for other people who look like me and people who may not look like me, but may come from other marginalized groups to say, hey, I want to be able to do that or aspire to do that too.
So can you tell us what is the populace of your students that are underserved, marginalized, and in the LGBTQ community that are at your school?
So at my current school, I don't know the percentage of like all of those demographics, but I do know that we are about 50% students of color.
Okay.
So, and then there's different breakdowns for all the different types of groups that we have, which I don't necessarily know that number. But when you think about the state of Minnesota, we are definitely one of the more diverse schools in the state. Traditionally, of course, Minnesota is a predominantly Caucasian state, but there are a lot of people that are moving to the state of Minnesota, and that's, of course, professionals, but also individuals who are coming for school. So we service a good number of people, and I think having more diverse faculty and staff and administrators helps with that group of population students that we have.
How do you define leadership in an academic context?
I think it's the same as any place. I think leaders have to one, be willing to lead by example. I think the way that anyone gets into a place of leadership is by one, being good at the craft that they have come up through, whether that's in the higher ed side or in the corporate side. And then once you have proven yourself in that way, then hopefully you're able to take what you've learned and what you've been able to be successful at and teach it to other people. I also think personally, my leadership philosophy is that, I want to empower other leaders to be able to go out and do the job. I don't have to be the one making all the decisions. I want to be able to come to the table and ask for assistance when needed, but also having the courage to be able to make a decision when it comes down to something that only I can make, being able to do that and stand by that decision. So I think being a leader, you have to be able to do all of those things. And of course, you want to be able to have collegial relationships with your team, but then knowing that, when you face challenges that may require the heat to kind of be raised up, you have to be willing to take the heat. And then, hopefully you have the support of your team so that, when you do that, they'll be willing to go and work for you and with you to get the job done.
So if you wanted to define that conceptually within, let's say, a sentence, how would you define that define leadership?
I think in one sentence, I would say leaders have to be able to gain the buy-in of their team while also not being afraid to lead from the front.
What changes in higher education inspire or challenge you the most today?
The biggest challenge that I get today is trying to understand the changing needs of our students. Of course, the students from the time when maybe you and I were in school, that demographic of student has changed. Those students are no longer coming to our colleges. I mean, even from when I was in school in undergrad and when I was working on my graduate studies, the types of students that were coming through back then are different today. Our population of students, for instance, even at my institution, on average, the average age is about 26. So, when you think about that, then there is a different set of needs that a 26-year-old needs than someone who was 17 or 18 when they were first coming out. So I think me just kind of working with our team and trying to understand who the students of today are, what are their needs. Of course, there's lots of things that students face. You have a lot of students that are adults now, a lot of students who may be parents, a lot of students who may be veterans. You have students who may deal with so many different things: poverty, homelessness, food insecurities. So understanding who our students are, and then from that place, we should be able to hopefully come up with solutions to educate them, because at the end of the day, they're still coming to school to get educated. So how do we resolve some of the things that they may be dealing with outside of the classroom? And then that will help lead them into hopefully accomplishing their educational goals.
That's an interesting dynamic that you just mentioned, because as we transcend and let's think about the community in general that's in the area where your school is, how does that concept in which you just described, how does that transcend to the community? How do you guys go out into the community to help to alleviate or relieve some of those situations or to help?
Yeah, so we have lots of programs. There's several programs that we have as a 2-year community and technical college to be able to partner with students. We have certain grants that we provide that, for instance, if a student is dealing with something like, say, they have a flat tire and they're not able to get back and forth to school, they can come to our student affairs department and apply for a grant called an emergency grant. And that will be a grant that is small, but that will help them to be able to pay for that repair so that they can get back and forth to school. We have a student resource center on campus where students can go and they can get food if they need it. So, they can just go there, they can share what their needs are, and then they will be able to get, there's a food pantry there. They can also get clothes for interviews if they don't have like a suit, if it's a man, or a dress, if it's a woman, and they can be able to get the things that they need in order to be successful and go out into the community. And a lot of our community partners, we do have program advisory boards. So we have community partners, whether they're from the corporate world or the nonprofit world or even from the government sector, and they partner with us to help us to know how we can best serve the people in the community that we serve. And they also provide opportunities for students to get internships and even employment opportunities when they're looking to get hands-on experience. So that's a few ways that we partner, but there are, like I said, several other ways that we do that.
Wow, that's really interesting to hear. And I'm sure that there are a lot of students, especially those that are potential students for coming to your school, probably when they hear about these programs and so forth, that I'm sure it helps you guys to continue your recruiting numbers, for where you're located. So can you tell us, like, how has that been more of a benefit to you guys that you know of? I'm quite sure you don't know what those numbers probably are to the T, but how has that been more beneficial for you guys at your school?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about any school, I think when students are interested in a college, they want to know who are going to be the people that they're going to be learning from. And I think it's important to have buy-in from the greater college community to be able to show up when available. So like, for instance, if there's a high school college career fair or something like that happening at a high school, if we have members from our admissions team or members from administration, or even sometimes the faculty are available, members from the faculty, to be available to answer questions from students and to do things like that, then it's important for all of us to be a part of those types of things. We're better together. So, we don't always say that everybody has to go to everything, but if everybody does their part, then collectively we're reaching a lot of people. And that's when we go out into the community. But then internally, we also welcome people to our campus. We do have open house every semester where we have all of our programs that will have faculty or staff and sometimes students who are currently in the program to be a part of this open house. And then we invite the community that's around our campus to come and learn about what it is that we offer, and they get to do tours of our facilities, because we have a technical side of our college too. So students can come and they can go look at, like, for instance, our HVAC lab or our cosmetology lab or our nursing lab, or things like that will give them the ability to see things. And our faculty members are the ones who are giving those tours, or sometimes the students. So I think by kind of having that multi-pronged approach, that really helps us to be able to reach that community.
So how do you approach developing the next generation of academic leaders?
I think the best way to do that is, one, I meet with them regularly to find out, like, what are their needs. So in the role that I'm in now, I supervise our academic deans, both on the academic affairs side and the student affairs side. But underneath that group of academic deans, we have our faculty program directors and our department chairs who are faculty leaders within their departments. And then on the student affairs side, we also have our directors. So we meet regularly and talk about what are the needs that they have. I'm big on professional development. So, trying to find ways to help encourage leaders to improve in their skill sets, whatever that may be. Maybe they want to go back to school and maybe pick up something more academic, but maybe they want to learn how to, deal with budgeting, or how to manage conflict, or how do they get out and be, better leaders in the community. So I look for ways to find resources to share with them, but also to encourage them to go to local and regional and national conferences where they can network and build better relationships with people in the fields that they're in, that will help them to become better professionals. So that's what I normally try to do to help with that growth and that development.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's really interesting, Dr. Warren, because I can just imagine, as you say, when you think back to when you and I were high school students going into college, it was, I'm not going to say that it was tough, but it was a little bit different. And I think the difference is, like sometimes resources are there, but we don't know that they're there because there's nobody actually leading, you to this point of knowing that, hey, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So just, with today's time and how things have evolved, and you guys have all these many resources where you're building your school. Like, are there any things that you felt like, since you've been in your leadership role, that maybe you're thinking about, or you guys are working on, that you could implement to improve and enhance what you guys have right now?
Yeah, I mean, one, professional development is not required by us as it relates to. There's nothing that says you have to do X number of professional development things per year, but it's definitely encouraged. And I think for me, one of the things that I hope to be able to continue to do is help to make sure that I am encouraging people in a way to where they're receptive to it, and they understand that we all are experts in different ways and in different fields, but it doesn't mean that we can't continue to learn and grow as professionals. So I think that will be my biggest thing, is trying to promote that culture where I don't have to be the encourager all the time. People are coming to me, or they're going to their supervisor saying, hey, I saw this conference, or I saw this training, or I want to grow in this area. And then they're proactively coming and saying, hey, I want to be a part of this. And I think once that culture kind of is developed within itself, then that would be a huge benefit to not just our college, but to our community and our students.
What legacy do you hope to leave in the world of higher education?
I think the biggest thing I can think about when I think about legacy is, one, that there are no barriers. Like, we can go as high as we want to go, even if people may doubt our intelligence or our brilliance or our ability to succeed in certain fields. All of that stuff is just noise. And I think if I can get people, and specifically thinking about people of color, to realize that, yes, we're going to have doubters, we're going to have haters, we're going to have people who want to try to limit our abilities or question our competence. But if we are confident in ourselves, and we're confident in the education we receive, the sky is truly the limit. And I say that as a matter of myself. People telling me that the path I took was not going to lead me to where I am today, but here I am. And if I had to listen to those individuals along the way, I would not be sitting here having this conversation with you tonight. And I think we're going to get that adversity, but it's how we handle that adversity is the thing that will either keep us from succeeding or empower us to succeed when we utilize that as motivation.
Are there key mentors or role models who shaped your leadership journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of them. One of the things I didn't talk about in the bio was so I grew up as a student athlete. I was fortunate enough to be able to get an athletic scholarship to attend my undergraduate university, the University of Alabama. And I think when thinking of mentors, my first set of mentors is my parents for sure. So they have mentored me even to this day. But then along with that, all the coaches I've had throughout the years. So, I did football, basketball, and track in high school. And then in college, I ended up getting a track and field scholarship. So I had a lot of those coaches. And then when I was in corporate America, I had several different managers who at different points of my career took time up to help me. And then when I got into higher ed, I've had countless numbers of current and former colleagues who have helped me along the way. And people that I could even call today to say, hey, I'm dealing with this issue, or I'm wanting to learn something about this, and they point me in the right direction. So there are very, very, very numerous number of people who I can attribute to that and helping me get into where I am right now.
Roll Tide.
Yeah, roll tide. That's something that I always can go back to. Like, even though I've gone to other schools and stuff like that, there's nothing like going to that undergrad program and being able to learn at that age and to just have that tie back to the college.
So how has your leadership style, excuse me, how has your leadership style evolved over time?
I think my leadership style has evolved. Like when I first became a leader, the biggest thing that I struggled with was telling people what to do. I remember vividly my first leadership position. I walked into it was in corporate. I walked into the place and I noticed some things that needed to be done. And I went over to the team and was telling them about like, oh, I think, these things need to be done. And one of the employees asked me, she was like, what do you want to do about it? And at that point, it hit me that they were waiting on me to actually give them the instructions. And that took some time for me to get used to because I was used to people giving me instructions at that point. Whereas now my leadership is very much empowerment. So I like to empower others to do the roles that they were hired to do, and then operate as more of a mentor or a coach or a guide, and then get out of their way. I think one of the big temptations of being a leader, especially if you're a new leader, is you want to show people what you know, what you can do, how you were able to be successful, and all those things. And in doing that, sometimes you hinder their growth and their ability to grow as a leader and as a professional. So I try my best to now give people that space and then let them know, hey, if you make a mistake, I'm here to help. Or if you fall, I'm here to pick you up. But I don't want to step in front of you and keep you from growing as a leader because I'm trying to, boost up my ego. So I think that's the way I've evolved just over the course of the years and being that leader.
So when you think about you going from follower to leader, what is some advice you may have for those that are under your leadership, that's in leadership right now, or for your students that are followers coming into leadership? What is some advice that you have for them?
One, the biggest piece of advice is none of us know everything. I think that's the biggest thing. It doesn't matter how long you've been in leadership, how much training you have, all of those things. We can all learn something from someone. So I think that's one of the biggest things. Another thing, I think, when you're thinking about coming from a position of maybe being a follower to where now you're more in a leadership role, I think the other part of that would be having the courage to make decisions. Because at some point, every leader is going to have to make a decision that a lot of people may not agree with. And that takes courage to be able to do that, and knowing that, you're going to upset some people, where you're going to have some people who are supportive and cheering you on. So it takes a courageous spirit to know that, you're always going to be probably making some decisions where some are happy and some are not. But then once you do that, having also the ability to stick with that decision when you know that it's the right decision. Because sometimes what happens is people make decisions as leaders. We know that it probably was the right thing to do, but then you may have the people who are upset or frustrated or mad about it, and then it can cause that leader to, if you're not sure about your decision making power and ability, it can cause you to change your mind, which can turn into now you're being an indecisive leader, which can cause another set of problems. So I think those are just some things that we can do. And then I guess the other part of that is being willing to always have a mentor that you can go to, or someone that you can lean on to help you in your decision-making process. Never make decisions like at the drop of a dime. Always take an opportunity to think it through, to talk it through with a colleague or a mentor, and then doing those things that helps all of us to become more effective leaders.
So, what innovations or programs are you most proud of implementing?
One of the things that I have been able to do in my current institution that I really am proud of is, when I first got there as a dean, um, I wanted to spend more time developing the leaders that were maybe not necessarily leaders with titles, but people that I saw as upcoming leaders. So one of the things I did with our department chairs and our program directors was I started doing an annual retreat. And it was just for the program directors and the department chairs. So when I was a dean, I oversaw a group of 73 faculty, 25 programs, and there was no way that I could, personally touch all of those individuals and do things. So I chose to spend a lot of my time developing that group of leaders that was department chairs and program directors. So at this retreat, I would always take away the operational things that we always have to focus on day to day, because a lot of times in our roles we get so caught up in the operations that we don't have time to think strategically and big picture and vision cast and all those things. So with this retreat, what I started doing was it was a day where I would take that group of leaders off campus. We would go to a place that didn't have Wi-Fi, technology wasn't great, and we would just spend a day brainstorming and dreaming and thinking about, like, if money wasn't a thing for us and we didn't have, restrictions on money and budgets and all that stuff, what would we want to do for our students? How would we want to grow our programs in our colleges? And, that turned into something where I started getting feedback every year that I've done it about how that was really impactful, because it slowed things down for us. We're all of us are in I like to say like a grind culture where you're trying to do so many things, you're trying to move to the next step, but this slowed things down, and it gave us an opportunity to really connect on a professional and personal level, but also to really think about how we wanted to set the course for our year. And I think that project is something that, I've seen grow, and now, I've seen relationships with different departments improve, and people who may not have known each other well in the past, now they know each other. And, every year, I think people look forward to that retreat, and it's something that I'm really proud of.
So, how do you measure the impact of your work on students and faculty?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is people being willing to come to work, come to school, and enjoy it. I think for me, on the faculty side of things, I always try to monitor the culture and the climate. And if I know that people are enjoying every day coming to work and not dreading it when they have to come in to work, and people willing to go the extra mile when needed, people willing to roll their sleeves up and work on projects that may not fall within their job description, but they're willing to do those things, I think that's super important. And then on the student side of things, knowing that students are able to succeed with all the challenges I've kind of shared earlier, thinking about a student who maybe they're a parent, or maybe they're a single parent, and they may not necessarily be in the career that they want to be in, but they're investing their time and their money every single day, every year, to come and try to better their lives And then at the end, we see that they're able to get that goal of graduation, and then they are able to transition into a different career that was something that they were pursuing. That is the ultimate level of being able to measure the impact. And hearing those stories and seeing the students who struggle, and then at graduation, they come and say, hey, I want you to meet my parents. Let's take a picture together. And then they know that that little bit of time that they spent with, whether that was a faculty member or an administrator or myself, that helped them to have the hope and encouragement to keep pursuing. Those are the things that I live for every day. And I think I get an opportunity to see day in and day out.
Oh, wow. Let's transition to your work as an author. Can you tell us what compelled you to begin writing, and how did your first book come to life?
Yeah, so my first book, No Regrets, Living Your Life to the Fullest, was kind of like a encouragement to myself. So this book was wrote back in 2007. I was a few years out from, I graduated. I started working in corporate America, and I started doing a little bit of research on the number of people who were in careers that they didn't enjoy. And people would say, come to work, not be happy, not enjoy it, looking forward to the weekend. As soon as the Monday hits, they would be dreading things. So I started thinking about, what could I do to encourage people to not do what some of the people that I've seen in the past do, which was spend 30, 40 years working at a company, retire, and that huge chunk of their life, they never really saw that as something that was feeding into them some growth. So I wanted to encourage individuals to not take that path of saying you got to go work at a job you don't like for 30 years. Why not try to live a life of no regrets, where you pursue the things you are really passionate about? And that's how that book was penned. It was me trying to encourage individuals who I had, started researching and saying, hey, you can, make that pivot if you're in a job or you're in a career that, maybe you thought it was the right thing for a period of time, and maybe it was for a season of life, but now your interests have changed, situations have happened. Now you can make the change and the pivot to go to another career and still feel like, you valued the things you got out of this first part of your career, but now in the second half, maybe there's more to the things you want to do. And that book kind of came out of that. So I give several principles on ways I think you can live a life of no regrets. And I've been able to, hear so many stories from people who read the book, and it gave them the courage to do some of those things.
So what core themes do you hope readers take away from your books?
One, that you can't start over. I've had to do that a few times in my career. There are times where I may have left different career fields to start a new path because it was something that I felt like I needed to do. And I think another part that I try to, convey in the book is that, you don't have to do it alone. I think a lot of people feel like if they have to pivot for whatever reason that is, they have to do that on their own. But there are lots of people, lots of resources waiting to support them. But it's going to take a step of faith and a step of courage for them to be able to step out and make a pivot. For instance, I think about when I was, for example, thinking about switching from corporate America into higher ed. I had no relationships in higher ed. I had no connections. I didn't know what to do to become a professor at that time. But it was something that I knew I wanted to do. So one, for me, the biggest thing I had to do was to get started with going back to school to get the education needed in order to become a college professor. And that was something that I had to do while I was still working full time, had young kids, all those things. But I think, trying to help people understand that, you can make those decisions. It's not too late when you become an adult to make a change. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people get stuck in, because they feel like once they have responsibilities, they have children, they have a home, they have, all these different things that they're taking care of, that they can't make that shift. But that's not, in my opinion, that's not a way you want to live, because you're gonna wake up one day thinking like, man, I regret all these things. So I hope to encourage people with that.
So, how does your writing inform your leadership or vice versa?
Yeah. So my writing informed my leadership because my second book that I wrote is called Push for the Journey, and it really is, it's a twofold thing. Is I wrote it as a way to push myself to keep going and to keep pursuing and to keep really trying to, walk out the journey of life that I've been given. But on the flip side, I also wanted to use that as a push for others to be able to read the different things in that book, because it's basically a 40-day journal where people can read about a story or something that happened in my life during different seasons and take a life principle from that, and hopefully they can apply it to their situation as a push to help them continue in their pursuits. So I use those types of things to help me in my leadership journey, because we're always growing, we're always learning, we're always trying to pursue how we can better ourselves as leaders, as professionals, myself as a man, as a husband, as a father. And I think all of those things, I try to take that mentality into my leadership, because no matter how long I've been in leadership, there's always something I can do better. There's always something I can learn, and there's always ways that I can grow. And I think I try to do the same thing in my writings.
Mm. So, when you write, I mean, what is your self talk while you're writing and you're creating? Because I know as a creator, that means there's so many things that go through your mind, especially when you're fixated on wanting to make this work for a lot of people. What are some of the things that go through your mind while you're creating?
Yeah, I always start with um, who am I writing this book for? That's like the big question I try to start with. So, am I writing to someone who may be a single parent and they're in a job that say that maybe they don't like, but they may feel like they're stuck and they can't get out of the situation? What would I say to that person? To one, encourage them, to let them know, hey, don't give up. Two, to give them some guidance on, hey, here are some steps you can take to maybe turn your situation around. And then three, how can I, really open up the door for them to be inspired to have that courage to make that first step? Because I think oftentimes when I'm writing to someone, say in that situation, they may have tried a couple times and failed, or they may have people in their circle who may be not necessarily the best for them, maybe telling them that they're not going to ever be good at it, or they can't do it, or you have all these things. So I try to think about the person that I'm writing to. And then another thing I try to do is I try to think about, what outcome do I want them to get from this book? Do I want them to walk away with something tangible? Like one of my books, I have a place for them to read a chapter and then write their notes and their thoughts about what they read. So then they can go back to that and actually look at, like, this is where they were when they started reading this book, and this is the notes and the nuggets they've taken away from it. And hopefully that can turn into action for that individual. So I think about those things. And then the last thing that I try to think about when I'm writing a book is I try to think about, when I'm not here anymore, 100 years from now, will this book still be relevant? Can this book still be picked up by someone, my grandchildren, my great grandchildren, or someone like that, and still be applicable for them? And I try to really think about those things, so that the principles and the things that I'm sharing in those books today will stand the test of time. And I think those are some things that I really try to focus on when I'm writing.
So, are there any specific Black authors who influenced your voice as a writer?
You know, so in my genre, because I'm really more in the professional development space. Um, I don't really have many people that I could think of that are Black authors. The people that really have inspired me the most, who have written books, are individuals like a Les Brown. And, Les Brown is mainly known for his speaking, but he's written books. I think he's someone that I try to really model myself after, because I like the way he talks about, there's no limits. There's no limits that we can set our own course. There's another guy that I follow, E.T. Thomas. They call him the hip hop preacher. He's out of Atlanta, Georgia. He is, again, predominantly a speaker, but he's getting into doing more writings and things like that. But those individuals are people that I follow, and I look at some of their social media platforms and things like that. So I would say those would be the people. And I also try to look at people who may not necessarily be in my same space, but maybe they've written books. So Percy Miller, Master P. I read some of his books, and I like to try to take things away from that style. And I think people like that are really inspiring to me, and I try to take what I can glean from that and then utilize it in my own life.
So, what role does reflection play in your creative process?
It's huge. So I try to journal, and I try to do that, if not daily, then at least a couple of times a week. And I do that as a way to reflect on just kind of how far I've come, but also I try to think about what decisions I may have made or what mistakes I may have made, and how can I learn from those things. And I think for me, the moments where I've had to go back and say, okay, this didn't turn out the way that I wanted. If I had to do this again, what would I do differently? Those are the things that I try to share when I am writing, because I hope that by me sharing my mistakes and my shortcomings and the things I've learned, that other people who may be coming behind me or reading a book that I've written, they may be able to not make some of those same mistakes, and it helps them to advance further and faster than maybe I'll be able to do. So reflection is a very huge component of my writing process, for sure.
So, what are some of those things, if you had to reflect? What are some of those things that you want people to not do that you did?
One example of that would be, so I feel like I'm a risk taker. And, I think for me, one of the things that I saw some challenges around was understanding when to pursue a project and when not to pursue a project. So early on, just when I was, a lot younger, I didn't have kids, I would just go after things without thinking them through a lot. So I lost a lot of money trying to invest in projects or trying to start this business or do that or whatever. And those things led me to, maybe being in debt, racking up a lot of credit card debt, having to kind of walk back decisions that I made. And I think that taught me, one, the importance of thinking things through before just stepping out, because I think there has to be a balance of, being able to take risk, but then also being able to count up the cost of what that is going to do if it doesn't work out. So it's taught me how to slow down a little bit, but then also it's taught me truthfully how to lean on the people around me more. Like my wife is probably the biggest supporter that I have. And then also she is someone I can go to and I can kind of, share with her what I'm thinking and how I'm thinking about things, whether that's projects or or new ideas and things, and she'll be that sounding board, but not just a sounding board to listen, but also to say, hey, you know, if you want to go this path, have you thought about this X, this Y, this Z, so that I don't get myself in a situation where now I'm out here and we're, you know, thousands of dollars into this project and then realize it wasn't the way that we wanted to go. So I think those are things that I've done that, you know, has helped me to now at the stage of life that I'm in now, to be able to say, hey, before we make that move or we take that step, let's really think this thing through and let's look at every possible thing we can think of before we make the decision.
So, have any personal stories or family experiences found their way into your work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When I think about family, for instance, is super important to me, and one of the things that I've done in the past is I have left jobs because they were impacting my family life. So I used to work when I was in corporate. I worked in retail. I was a retail manager, and you know, working 60 hours a week, 65 hours a week was just not something that I could sustain and do some of the things that I was wanting to do. I was also in school and I was trying to raise young kids, so I ended up having to walk away from some jobs because it wasn't working out for my family life. And I think by doing that, it helped me to keep family as a priority. My wife and I were, of course, on the same page when those things were happening. And I think that drew us closer together. And I think because of that, now when I'm in positions where, you know, I'm in, you know, equally demanding roles, I have the support of my wife and our kids to be able to balance out that as needed. And I think keeping family first in my career has been vital because I never wanted to be in a position to where, say, I got to a certain position or whatever career path, and then I'm there alone because my family doesn't know who I am. We don't spend much time together, all those things. And I think I've been able to do that, and we still enjoy being able to spend time together. My wife and I, we commit to making sure we take vacations every year. I still do things with my kids. I coach my boys and youth sports, and no matter how busy I get, I'm always going to be there on game days and things like that, which I think has really helped to keep me grounded and helped me to be able to be focused on the things that I think matter just as much as other areas of my life.
So, what was the most challenging chapter you've written and why?
Oh man, and I'll think about, and I'm assuming you're saying challenging chapter in life,
You know, a chapter you've
and I
written
would
in your book.
say, okay, um, so I'll say the most challenging chapter that I've written, and I'll think about it from the life perspective so far, was a few years ago. My wife and I, we had to go through a season where her mom battled brain cancer,
Ooh.
and it was extremely difficult for us because that was the first parent out of both of us who had to deal with something like that. It ended up my wife's mom passed away in 2021. And that was the first time in our marriage. We've been married for 20 years. As of this year, we've been married for 20 years. That was the first time we've had to go through the struggle of dealing with a sick parent. And my wife and I, we don't live around either of our parents. So being 23 hours away and having to go back and forth between work and student activities with kids and all those things took a toll. I mean, and it was very difficult for us. But supporting my wife through that and supporting our kids through that was very challenging, especially because at that time we had both, my wife and I had fairly recently started new careers as far as like in different places. So so that was tough. And during that time, we just really leaned on our faith, and then we leaned into each other to try to get through that. And then when I think about my books, I think the biggest challenge that I had writing my second book specifically was while I was in my doctoral program, I was finishing up the second book, and the challenge that I faced was getting to a point to where I almost stopped going to school because I had a situation where on my doctoral committee, um, one of my um, one of my committee members ended up leaving the institution halfway through me writing my dissertation. And when I found out that they were leaving, it was dramatic for me because I would have to find someone else to be on the committee member. And I also realized that that new committee member would probably want me to do something different than what I was doing with the committee member that I had. So I had to really push myself, and I leaned onto my support network to to not give up. I talked to my one of my chair members, and they encouraged me not to give up and to continue to go through the process, and it would all work out. And eventually, it did. So I think that was a part of my writing journey. So that story is in the second book of how I tried to lean into those things and help me get to the end goal, which was completing my doctorate.
So, how do you balance vulnerability and authority as an author?
I think it's needed because we all are attracted to stories. I think people really relate to us when they know that we are relatable. And I think even when I think about my family, sometimes there was a period of time where I uh, started telling some of my family, my siblings, my parents about some of the things that I had gone through. And they were like, "Oh, we didn't know that you had gone through those things because one, I didn't share it, but then two, they was like, oh, on the outside looking in, it looked like everything was just going the way it's supposed to go." And when I started like really kind of peeling back that onion a little bit and really starting to be a little bit more vulnerable, uh, I started noticing that people were being impacted in ways that I didn't even know was significant at the time. So I think those are things that I've learned throughout my time is to be vulnerable. And I mean, honestly, I don't really think that you can be too vulnerable. I think it's more of how do you turn that vulnerability into a story that can be impactful for others, because we all go through things that someone else is going to probably go through at some point in their lives. So if we're able to share that, then it helps them to know when they get to that point in life that they can too also get through it.
So, which piece of feedback from a reader has stayed with you?
Man, I've had readers tell me that they've read my books and it has caused them to, you know, have the courage to go back to school, to change course, and to do something that they probably had put on the shelf and decided they were not going to do this before. One of the books that I wrote, I share a story about when I was trying to get my master's. And when I was in that process, it took me 3 tries to complete my master's degree. And, every time there was for various reasons. The first time I was, newly out of my undergrad program. I was working, I was traveling a lot. I ended up having to stop. The second time, I thought I was going to be able to go through and finish it, but life kind of got in the way. I had to stop. And it wasn't until that third time where I really leaned into the supports around me, my wife, my church family, and even my employer at the time, because they were actually helping me to provide tuition assistance. That was when I was able to successfully do that. And by sharing that story, I've had people tell me like, "Oh man, I also went through a similar season," and they felt the need to be able to say, "Hey." because of that story, I feel like I can go back and I'm not a failure if I don't complete it on the first try. And I think those stories stick with me because when I was going through that, of course, I didn't know that I was going to be able to use that to share with other people. But now looking back on it, I can be able to share that story and hopefully provide hope to other people who may be in that same process today. So that's one really good example that I can share of how that's impacted other people.
So, how would you describe your mission as an author in one sentence?
My mission is to help encourage other people to know that they can live a life of purpose, passion, inspiration, and celebration. Basically, that will be the sentence. But to break that down, I want to encourage people to live a life that's always growth, growth minded. So that's where the progression is. Passion, doing something that they love, doing something that they're passionate about. Inspiration is just, I think we all should live a life that inspires others to find their thing and to find their passion. And then once you do that, also realize that we only get one life, so we have to be able to celebrate. We have to celebrate ourselves. We have to celebrate where we've been. We have to celebrate where we're going, and make sure that we don't get so stuck on pursuing the thing that we're not enjoying the journey. So I think that will be the sentence that I really want to be able to drive home with people is strive to live a life of progression, of passion, of inspiration, and celebration.
Staying in this in the world of creativity, let's talk about your podcast, Changing the Narrative. What motivated you to launch Changing the Narrative?
Yeah, this was a podcast that was started based off of, it actually goes back kind of to COVID. I'm from Alabama originally. So I moved to the state of Minnesota in the fall of 2017. So I grew up in Alabama, lived there my entire life, went to college there for undergrad, all those things. My wife is from South Carolina. And when we moved to Minnesota in 2017, we moved to a very rural area of the state. So it was about an hour and a half from the Canadian border. And when we moved there at the time, the population was 1% Black. So, those years prior to COVID were really, I think, eye-opening for us because we were coming from a very different culture. We were learning how to operate in the Midwest, how to operate in a culture that was very rural and things like that. But then during the time of COVID, there were a few things that happened. One was that was the time when George Floyd got murdered in Minneapolis. And two, that was the time where we all had to quarantine and we had to kind of be in our own space. Those two things together were very difficult for me because I was working at higher ed at the institution that I was at. And I started to realize how isolating and how lonely it could be when you don't have community around you. So during that time, it was really, really difficult for me to engage in building community because there was two things happening, I think, at the time. The first thing was I was seeing in real time the life and the value of the Black man being kind of quenched. We all got to see the video of George Floyd, but during that time there was also Ahmaud Arbery, who he ended up getting murdered, and all these things. And then you start thinking about all the people that happened before that and the people that happened after that. So I was seeing that, but then not having someone to talk to about it. Of course, I had my wife, and I talked to our kids about it. But as a man and as a Black man, I would want to have that other Black man I could go to and talk to about these things. And the community that we were a part of, that wasn't there. So I felt the need in that moment to be transparent enough to say, hey, I want us to be able to value other Black men the same way that our families value us. And so when I moved to Minneapolis, where we are now, I'm in the Minneapolis area. I joined the group 100 Black Men of the Twin Cities. Mm-hmm. And I remember one day I was sitting in a meeting, and here it was 30 or 40 Black guys. Everybody was, progressive. They were doing things in their careers. They were family men. They were community volunteers. They were doing all these things. And in my head, I was like, the world outside of this room have an image of Black men that I wasn't seeing in that space that I was in. Because outside of that space, people were saying Black men are to be feared. They're criminals. They're deadbeat dads. They're not good for anything. And I was in a room that was literally dispelling that myth of all those things. And I was like, we have to find a way to showcase these types of men, because the media is not showing any of this. They're not showing the husbands, the fathers, the teachers, the doctors, the coaches, the pastors, all the people that I was seeing and interacting with on a regular basis. So I partnered with one of the members of the 100 Black Men, and him and I, we decided that we wanted to find a way to do our part to really dispel those negative narratives with positive ones. So we've been able to interview people who were in different spaces. Our goal has always been to showcase Black men in spaces where we don't always think of Black men, because we always think of them as being in athletics, either in entertainers or in blue collar jobs, which there's nothing wrong with blue collar jobs, but thinking of them in those spaces, and we don't think about them working for NASA or being in education, like being a provost or a dean or a college president. We had a college president that we interviewed. We don't think about them being multilingual and being a double major in Spanish, and now they're teaching Spanish in the high schools, things like that. So I think our goal has always been, how do we showcase the value of the Black man that the world is not accustomed to seeing, in hopes that we would change the narrative around what it means to be a Black man in our country.
Oh, you said so much there, but I just have one follow-up for you, because you said something that kind of like that jolted me again. And that is, as you experienced that situation with George Floyd, like all of us, as you say, we all saw that video. And when we saw that, when we all saw that video, and I'm sure that when you saw that video, that it had to do something to your psyche. And when thinking about the COVID situation and being quarantined, locked inside, not having any outside communication unless you're dialing on that phone, and sometimes some people are just not phone people, but to just have that direct connect to actually, to get it out, to be expressive, and to get these other opinions it had to have done something. My thing to you, and my next question is, as you're actually thinking to create this podcast, how much of that fury were you able to unleash as you guys did those interviews, and have people to look and see that you're looking at sensationalized media compared to what's reality here? How were you able to unleash some of that fury?
So one of the questions we ask every guest is how they feel like the impacts of media has impacted their lives. And I think, getting the various answers from that question from the different people we've interviewed has been super impactful. But another thing that we also do is we try to be intentional with asking them questions around what ways are they giving back to their communities? How are they adding value to their communities? And all the people that we've been interviewing, it's amazing all the things that they're doing. You have people that are again, volunteering at nonprofits. Some people are starting nonprofits. People are mentoring. You have people that are really involved in church and pastoring and things like that. And there are so many different things that Black men are doing that don't always get recognized, that I think that has been a way for us to combat that and release some of that frustration and that fury, because a lot of times when people see a Black man, especially an adult, they may not even have other Black men that they know. So when they see someone, they automatically think about that thing that they saw on TV. So one of the reasons why we tried to get involved in the podcasting world was because we feel like we know that media is a powerful tool. So we're like, okay, we want to be in that space, and hopefully the message and the word gets out more, and people can hear and they can see, because our interviews are on YouTube, but then they're also available on any podcasting platform, so people can hear how Black men are really making a positive impact in their communities. And hopefully that message will be spread through media, and that will give people an opportunity to, when they next time they see a Black man, they may think twice and say, hey, I wonder if this person is a teacher. I wonder if this person is a business owner. I wonder if this person is a mentor, and not think negatively about that individual.
So what narrative specifically are you working to shift, and why now?
So the biggest narrative is that, Black men can be anything. We're not limited to only certain spaces. And the other part of that narrative is that, all Black men aren't the same. Like a lot of times people try to lump us up and together into saying, oh, you have to be, a rapper or an entertainer or a coach or, this, that, or the other. And that's not true. Like we are in every space, in every field. When we get in those spaces, we add value to those spaces. And I think the reason why we're doing this now is because now is the right time. I think it should have been done years and years and years ago. And it to a certain extent, people have been trying to do this and they've been trying to advocate, but we want to be specific to our group of people and trying to make sure that we're trying to make our dent in the world of trying to really impact positively the image of Black men. And I think the reason why the timing now is so important is because there's been so much over the past several years of Black men being killed and misjudged and mischaracterized and all these things. And I just feel like there's a lot of that negativity going on out there. So we need to put some positivity back into the environment so that hopefully we can combat some of that narrative that's out there.
So how do you select your guests and craft episodes that resonate?
So we select our guests. A lot of our guests have been people that we've known and we've met. And the biggest thing that we try to do is we look for Black men who are in career fields that are not always thought about. So I mentioned a few of them, but then we've also had people who are, say, like Black architects, Black men that are in computer science, and Black men in technology. So we try to think about those fields, and then we also try to think about how do we not just celebrate people who are in those fields, but how do we celebrate them being in the field tied to what they're also doing in the community? Mm-hmm. Because there are people who probably are in certain positions, but they don't really add value to the community. They're not giving back. So we try to find out those things. So when we're looking for guests, we're looking for individuals who are doing both. And then another element of that is we're also looking for men who are, they're good family men. they're taking care of their responsibilities. If they're married, they're taking care of their spouse. If they have children, they're taking care of their children, and they're not just out here and not adding value in those ways too. So I think all of those things are important. We don't always look for people who have a large following, because in my perspective is there are a lot of Black men who made a ton of impact in the lives of their communities, and a lot of people may not know who they are, but they're making a huge impact. So I think for me, I try to find ways to balance all of that out. And then sometimes, of course, we get referrals from the people that we've interviewed in the past, because I feel like people who are of like mind typically hang together. And that's what we try to do to secure our guests.
So what episode stands out as particularly transformative for you?
Ooh, that's a really good question, man. One of the things that was super transformative to me was, one of our guests he works for NASA. And this guy, I've actually known him for a long time. We used to go to church together back in Alabama, and and it was amazing to me to have him on the show and to interview him about his profession. Because when you get to know this person, he's very nice, very cordial, very giving, great father, great husband, all these things. But to hear the technical things that he talked about when we talked about what is it like working for NASA, some of the projects he's worked on, his research around like trying to help create commercial stuff going into space and stuff like that. It was so impactful to me, because here it was, if I didn't know this guy, and if nobody was listening to the interview and they just saw him in the streets, they would think that he's just like any other Black man that they've seen on TV. But here it is, this person is making quantum leaps into science and research and space and all these things. And it's like, and he looks like you and I, and I think, even at the end of the interview, I think I remember saying to him, like, at that point, it just blew my mind, just the way he thinks and the things he talked about. And we could have probably interviewed that person for another couple of days. But that was probably one of the most impactful ones that I could think of.
So how has the podcast changed you as a communicator or leader?
Yeah, as a communicator, it's helped me to become better at asking questions, deeper questions. So when we first started, we had the same set of questions for every guest. But as the podcast has evolved, we've started changing up our questions a little bit. And we've also kind of expanded the things that we were asking about, because we got feedback after the end of our first season, and people wanted us to be able to go deeper and to actually expand the conversation, because the podcast it used to be about 30 to 35 minutes. Now we're closer to 45 minutes or so, to try to get more questions in there. And then as a leader, it's just helped me to know that, man, we are able to provide opportunities for people to share their story, and to be able to really get the narrative out there that we're hoping to get. And that is that Black men can be anything, they can do anything, and we are making a positive impact. So I think that to me has helped me to realize that, I do have the ability to lead in this space along with my co-hosts, and to be able to unlock that door for other people.
So one of the last things here that we want to cover is, I told you we do Black History 365. And I asked you, who was the most influential person in your life and your career in Black history? You told me it was your mother and your father. And can you tell us, how did your mother shape your view of service and leadership?
Oh, absolutely. My mother, even to this day, has shown me a visible example of what it means to serve. So my parents have 7 kids, and my mother stayed home with all of us when we were growing up and doing the things, and she just gave. She, even today, like if I was to call her today and say, "Mom, I need this," or "I need something," she's gonna do it. But my mom is also a pastor, so she's giving back to the community in so many ways. That way, both her and my dad are in ministry, and my mom has she has done so many things around volunteering at the schools, serving as a substitute teacher. My dad, when I was growing up, my dad was the chaplain for a homeless shelter in the community that we're a part of, and my mom would go there also and help in whatever ways, whether that was serving food or helping with food drives and things like that. And even today, she goes and she volunteers in the court system, helping in certain ways. And I can never think of a time where my mom did not help someone. Um, and it's gone on to today. She's retired now from education, but now she still does all these other things. So yeah, I would say she's shown me and continues to show me the service aspect of her life.
So, what lessons from your father do you carry with you every day?
Perseverance. Again, my dad, he he has been working ever since I've been living. I think my dad has shown me the importance of standing by your family. He also pastors, so he's been a pastor. He's fathered all of us. He's provided for us. He's shown me what it means to really persevere, even when you weren't understood all the time. What it means to be that leader for your family, for your community, even when people may not have agreed with some of your decisions or may have even appreciated some of the things you do, that they take for granted. I've learned that from him, and I've learned how to stick through things that were hard and were difficult, because that's the role that we play as men. And sometimes, when I'm going through tough situations, I'll call him and I'll ask him, like, how would you handle this situation, or have you ever experienced a situation like that? And he would share with me things that I didn't even know he was experiencing. So I think those are the things that I've learned from him, is to be a man of your word and to display good character and integrity in all the things that you do. And I think those things have really stuck with me.
So, when you reflect on Black history, how do your parents fit into that story?
I think both my parents have broke the mold in so many different ways. My dad is a tradesman by profession, and when I think about people in the trades, typically I don't think about Black men. When I think about the people in the trades, often there are people who are maybe middle to older white males who may be, you know, working in things like heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, so HVAC, or in the plumbing world or in auto service and things like that. So my dad has been doing that for so many years, as long as I've been living. And I think he's been able to make a very good career out of it. And I think, he broke the mold for me because he was the first person I ever knew that exposed me to like what it means to even be in the trades. I didn't even know that that was something that was commendable work, because, growing up, you always think about, oh, you want to be a doctor or you want to be a lawyer or you want to be this. But what a lot of people don't realize is being in the trades is a very rewarding career, and it can be a very lucrative career if you do it and you do it well. So I think that part of him breaking the mold was there. And then with my mom, just being in the place where she was, when, like I said, she stayed home with us as kids, but then she was able to, even after we got to adults and stuff, she was able to reinvent herself and get into, pastoring. And then, she went back to school, got her doctorate degree, all those things as an adult. And I think, she has shown me that whole story of living with no regrets and being able to pivot. I've seen that in her, and how she's been able to do that. And I think both my parents have impacted us in so many ways that it's really hard to think about them doing the things that they did growing up during the time that they grew up, and how they were able to stay together. My parents have been together for 53 years as of this year, and all the things they've gone through. And that to me, it has shaped the way I view Black history, because they've raised all of us to be self-sufficient and on our own, and to making an impact in our own way.
So, what role did family conversations about race and resilience play in your upbringing?
Oh, we had those daily. Even to this day. My my mom and dad were really good at informing us about our history. Of course, growing up in Alabama, there's a lot of history from there. So taking us to the museums and making sure we understood just the impacts of our race, and the way that we have to think about things. But my mom also she's a pastor in the AME church, so African Methodist Episcopal Church. So that, even in and of itself, has given me the ability to learn and grow, and just go deeper, and like understanding how race, even in religion, has how it was impacted. And I think for me, both seeing the struggle of my parents and how they have been able to rise from some of those struggles, and I think some of it was contributed to race. I think that has been super impactful for me, and it's given me the courage to know that when I face challenges similar to that or not similar to that, that I have the ability and I have the DNA in me to be able to rise from those same struggles.
So, how have your parents' sacrifices influenced your professional mission?
Man, it's both. When I think about this question, it is influenced it greatly. One, the thing that I've learned from the sacrifices of my parents is that you never know how much a sacrifice for you is going to be the launching pad for someone else.
Mm.
And when I say that, I think about the path that I'm on now. So when I was getting ready to switch careers and all this stuff, I was in the interview process, and I was going through this process of trying to get out of corporate America, getting into higher ed. And I had an opportunity to go interview for a college in Minnesota. I was still living in Alabama, but I didn't have the money to go on the interview. And my mom actually paid for me a plane ticket to go to interview for this school up in northern Minnesota. And at the time, I was like, I just want to go and I just want to experience the interview. Probably not going to move there, whatever. So her paying for me to go there and do that ended up leading to me getting the job. And if it had not been for her paying for that ticket, I would not be on the career path that I'm in today. Because prior to that, I had interviewed at so many other places, so many other schools, and had not been able to successfully make the transition into higher ed full time. And I think if she hadn't made that sacrifice and spent that money on her credit card, and I ended up, telling her this afterwards, I was like, I know that I wouldn't be where I am today, because I probably still would be working somewhere in corporate and trying to make this change. So I think that sacrifice for her was the launching pad for me to get where I'm going. So it reminds me that whatever sacrifice I can make for other people, no matter how large or how small, can be the launching pad to their, to their next step, whatever that might be.
Wow. Is there a memory that perfectly captures their influence on you?
Yeah, I think the biggest memory I can think of is seeing how my parents balanced raising their family and being pastors to other people. Um, being a pastor's kid or a preacher's kid is very difficult for the children, because you get to see your parents in different lights. You see them as their pastors, but you also see them as parents. So seeing how they were able to balance that and the nuances of being uh, a public figure, but also mom and dad, and seeing how they balance like forgiveness with one another, and how they balanced also parenting us and not putting us in a place to where they didn't put a glass house around us and things like that. And I think just having that memory, it helped me to understand the importance of grace, and how to be graceful with one another, and how to be graceful with other people, and know that everyone is on a journey. And I think that is something that I've tried to take in my own life, and it's impacted me in the way I interact with my family, but also the way I interact with other people, even in the workplace, because we're all working out various things in our own lives, and we need grace to do that.
Final question. How do you honor their legacy through your platform and projects?
Yeah, I think the best way for me to honor their legacy, as well as all the other mentors that I've had, is to be who they've invested in. All the people, my parents included, who've invested in me, who have supported me, who prayed for me, who've done those things. The best thing I can do for them is to go out and be the person that they saw when they invested in me, and live out the potential that they saw. And I think by me doing that is the best way I can say thank you to all of those individuals, because had it not been for them doing the things that they did, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. So I know I may not always get to go back and meet and share and talk with the different people who've invested in me from when I was in school all the way up. But if I can live out that person that they saw when they saw that young, shy person sitting in the classroom, not talking, and I can be that person that's out here making an impact, I think they can look at that and say, hey, they had a hand in shaping the person I am today.
So, in conclusion, what would you like to leave with our audience as some words of wisdom, encouragement, things that they should know, how they can follow you on social media, how they can connect with you on your website, just any of those things you'd like for them to know?
Yeah. So I would say, in closing, that it's never too late to make a pivot. No matter if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, or above, you can always make a pivot and have the courage to do that. But in doing that, know that it may not always be easy. It doesn't mean you're not going to have to face adversity, but have the people around you to support you along the way. And I am pretty sure that if you do that, then you will be able to look back on it after a period of time and say, hey, this was the right decision for me. So just have that courage to make those decisions. And I think people can always connect with me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. All platforms is just Dr. Gabriel Warren, just my name, Dr. Gabriel Warren. And my website is drgabrielwarren.com. So all those ways are ways you can connect with me. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can always go there and you can click on that link. If you're interested in learning more about the books, you can do that. if you are interested in having me come out and talk, I'm always willing to do that as well. All that stuff is on the website, drgabrielwarren.com, and you can learn more about some of the things I talk about, and also just schedule a time to get in contact with me. But I definitely have enjoyed this, and it's been a great opportunity to, kind of talk a little bit about some of the things I do, and I'm looking forward to learning more about the audience that has been listening, and then to connect with some people in the future.
Right. Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Warren, for spending this time with us, because this has been more than just truly enlightening. This is definitely, the kind of talks that I like to have with my audience, because I want people to know that there are people, as you were stating with your platform, that there are people that look like you, that do many, many, many things from many, many facets. But those are the people that I want them to get to know, because it's very, very important that everybody don't have to be celebrity status in order to have capital in the community in which we are engaging to build. If they have no capital in the community, that's definitely a waste of time. But if you've got capital in the community, that's what's important. And so for those of you that are listening, Dr. Warren has taught us many, many things. The key thing is, when he first started this conversation and we were talking about leadership, when he was talking about leadership, leadership comes in many ways, many styles, many forms, but it does not mean that you're not a leader. Sometimes you got to learn to follow before you become a leader. But if leadership is what you desire, then that means that you've got to put in the work to build that entire situation in order to make it not just grow, but to make it build and be very, very profitable. Leadership is about the profitability of the work that you do. It's not always monetized. Monetization does not always get you to the point of where you think you want to be. Because if you are connected with those people that you lead, that means that you're already not just being successful, but you're making the impact that you're looking to impact. When we talked about his work as an author, remember what he mentioned about the impacts of doing those two different books and the meanings that they had, not just on him and his career, but what he wanted you as an audience to get from those books. Please go and check out his website. Please check out those books, because I can rest assure you, whether you're a student that's getting ready to go to a major college, if you're somebody that's working in a particular environment where you want to not just be a leader, but you also want to be a much better person, you need to read these books, because these books will help you to make better decisions as you grow in your career. And last thing, as we talked about his podcast, his podcast, Changing the Narrative. Changing the narrative is very important for people that look like you and I. Because if you don't change the narrative and somebody else is always writing your story, how do we know it's your story? Nobody can tell your story no better than you. Sensationalism is not where it's at. Mainstream media has nothing for you. Mainstream media is giving you all false narratives and trying to change with some truth to get you to buy and believe in the things that they're putting out. It's not positive to see all the time people saying that Black people are thieves and murderers and things of that nature. No, that's not. Well, we have that situation now, don't get me wrong. But believe me, there are other groups of people that are doing that way, way more than what we do. So as we create our media, that's what you should be following, because we're giving you the truth and nothing but the truth. So I say, again, as we build community, we unify, we grow, we expand. That's where we need to be, especially right about now. It's people like Dr. Warren that actually make that difference, because as the younger folk are transitioning into young adulthood, these are the people they need to see in order to feel that impact that they need to know that, yes, I can do this. It's that important. So I want to thank each and every last one of you for watching the show. For those of you that are watching on the YouTube channel, if you have not yet subscribed, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We definitely would love to have your support. Get all of the notifications. You'll be able to watch all of the shows live because you will get the notification, but you're also able to go back and watch each and every show that we've recorded over the last 3 seasons. We definitely love to have you to be a part of this movement that's growing. And this movement means one thing. As we build our communities, we're building our communities to make them stronger, bigger, and better. We also want them to be a solid foundation as our younger youth grow into adulthood. Dr. Warren, I want to thank you again for being here, and we definitely have to have you back because this was definitely an impactful conversation. You know, the work that you do and the things that you're doing to build your school, I want you to know that I'm very, very happy to have you as being one of the positive people here on our platform that has come and is able to display, you know, the many, many facets of what it is to be a strong Black man and a strong leader. Because it's people like you that set the example, and you're one of the people that we want to make sure that people get to know. And so, you know, as we go forward, like I said, I hope that you come back, but, you know, it's also a good thing to have, people see people that look like you and I that can do many, many things. Thank you all for this great show on Monday. We will be back tomorrow night with another great show. And please join us tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, on America in Black and White, where we're coloring conversations on America's canvas to help build communities and make them strong. You all have a great night, and we will see you tomorrow. Have a great evening.